Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 4, Episode 15, The Bar Association. This episode aired February 19th, 1996. Before we talk about this one, anything to say about last week's podcast, The Sons of Moog?
No, it was perfect.
The Klingon episodes are always so exhausting. I mean, there's so much drama.
Oh yeah, it's not as good as the Sword of Kahless, but it was a pretty good episode.
I'm still questioning the easy way we wiped Kern's memory. I just feel like if it was that easy, we'd be doing that stuff all the time.
Klingons don't have a lot of memory, that's my summary.
Oh, okay. It's mostly emotion.
Yeah.
Well, I have some bad news about this episode.
What's that?
It appears to be a Ferengi episode.
Okay, yeah, that is bad news for you.
Well, between Dukat and the Ferengi nonsense, someone is determined to dislodge Season 4 as a happy place for me.
I see.
But the show must go on.
Indeed it must.
In the cold open, some of the crew is returning from a mission in the Gamma Quadrant on the Defiant. Worf noticed some maintenance is needed on the ship to keep it running at its peak. Dax thinks that he's in love with the Defiant, which seems right.
Well, why wouldn't he be? The Defiant is pretty much awesome.
Yeah, and I think being on a Starfleet ship is his happy place, somewhere he feels more in control than the chaos of the station. And also, who doesn't like being in charge?
That's a really good point. It's something that Worf is grounded in.
Yeah.
That allows him to keep his feet in reality, as it were.
Yeah.
I like that.
Well, in Quark's, Lita laughs at Miles and Bashir dressed for their holosuite program, the Battle of Clontarf from 1014.
That's what they're telling people. They actually have a Ren Fair program that they're running.
Oh, I see. I don't understand their obsession with bloody war. I mean, I imagine we're supposed to think it's like a video game to them, but geez, how about a Mario Kart holosuite or something?
Wow, that would be awesome.
I think we need more Mario Brothers and less Battlefield. Well, Quark looks around the empty bar and sighs. This month marks the Bajoran time of cleansing, where Bajorans abstain from worldly pleasures, and it seems to be negatively impacting his business. Ram is half ignoring him as he complains about his ear hurting, and he pours some fizzy concoction into his ear, like right at the bar, which is not hygienic. It's very gross.
Morn is already at the bar.
He is. Quark yells at Lita and basically threatens to fire her when she expresses sympathy for Ram. Eventually, Ram faints, and Quark says he'll dock his pay since he's not working while he's passed out on the floor.
I question how fair that is, especially as it's his brother.
Well, it's very Quark, on brand.
You'd think Quark, though, would have the common sense to prepare for the Bajoran time of cleansing, because it happens every year, right?
Right. He's not much of a planner.
Yeah. Once again, Quark, terrible businessman.
Yeah. Just complaining about everything, not doing anything about it.
That happens every year.
Yeah. I know lots of people like that. I remember something like that happening at work where a thing kept happening and somebody came to me to complain about it for the 30th time. And I told him, at this point, you control your own happiness about it because you know it's going to happen. What's the point of just, continuing to get mad about it? So it's the same thing here. It's like, why are you complaining about it? You knew it was coming. You should have done something about it.
Right.
It's a good time for a vacation, for example. Maybe close down the bar.
Oh, you'd save a lot on wages then.
Exactly. Well, now we go to the infirmary and we learn that Ram has had an infection of the tympanic membrane for weeks, but Quark doesn't allow any sick time. Bashir says another 48 hours without treatment might have killed him, but sick time and vacation is a violation of Ram's worker contract with Quark. We learn all Ferengi labor contracts are very strict and nobody revolts because the workers don't want to stop being exploited. They want to find a way to become the exploiters.
That was great. I think that's an amazing way for the Ferengi ruling class to actually control their workers.
Well,
or their workers are all like, oh, that could be me one day.
Well, I agree that might work to a small degree, but at a societal level, I'm not sure it makes sense.
I think it makes sense because the Ferengi are honestly dumb as a brush.
That seems true.
They're all just the worst businessmen ever.
I mean, maybe this is like when people who are unemployed vote for people who are super rich because they think someday they'll be super rich. And it makes no sense.
Oh, yes. I think that's probably part of the Ferengi mindset.
Well, anyway, Bashir here says that it sounds like the workers need a union. This seems to pique Ram's interest.
I liked it when Julian said to Rom, I don't see you exploiting anyone. I think this is important here because it's been addressed before. Rom really doesn't have the lobes for business. And I think that kind of stung Rom.
Well, but does he have the opportunity to? I mean, he's not the boss.
No, but I think the point is Rom isn't a person who would get himself into position of being a boss. Rom would always be the guy who would see the opportunity and miss the opportunity.
Yeah. I can see that they're trying to change the way we see Rom and maybe the way he sees himself. But remember back to that episode where he tried to kill Quark?
Yeah, oh, yes. Rom is not the character they started him out to be.
Yeah, I'm sure the writers are even surprised what they've done with him.
Yeah, I think if you go back to Unnecessary Evil, that was the first time the writers started to give Rom a little bit more intelligence because he could break the locks and pick into the wall panel and stuff like that. And I think the best part of that was Quark having no idea what his brother was really capable of. Right.
It was necessary evil, though, not unnecessary evil.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But close. Yeah.
I think it was unnecessary evil.
No, it turns out the evil was necessary.
Oh, okay. Hey, that's me making up my own names.
Oh, very good. Yeah. Well, back at Quark's, Leeta is relieved to see Rom is okay. Quark interrupts this conversation to say that he's cutting everyone's salary by 1/3. Rom and Leeta protest, but Quark doesn't care. Rom asks if Quark will restore salaries after the cleansing month is over, and Quark says maybe. Then Quark continues to be a jerk, and Rom says Quark is going to regret this, but Quark says the only thing he regrets is not being an only child.
Yeah, Rom stands up to Quark and gets the usual beatdown from his brother.
One of the problems I have with Quark as a character is the lack of nuance.
Yeah.
When he goes all Ferengi like this, I don't know if it's the acting or if it's the writing, but the way he acts ruthless just briefly, and then like a total coward, and then like he cares about Rom. I mean, I don't buy it as a viewer.
It's the writing. I think it's completely down to that. Did you notice again, though, when Quark is telling them he wants the place cleaned up and the lights off in 10 minutes, Morn is still at the bar. And then when he's having the confrontation with Rom, you see Morn like lumber out.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Morn is the last person out the bar most
First
nights.
one in, last one out.
Yes.
Now Worf and Dax are walking through the hallway after some more fake fighting in the holosuite.
I believe Klingons call that flirting.
Dax is playing with a mechleth instead of a batleth and wonders why Worf hasn't told her that she's getting better with that weapon. Worf says a Klingon warrior doesn't need the praise of his teacher. Dax says she's not a Klingon warrior. She's a beautiful, sensitive young woman. Seriously, who writes this? She's had 7 lifetimes. Am I really supposed to believe that she's super needy and would even at this point give a crap about what anyone else would think? This is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, it falls under 99.9% cheese.
The whole point of this garbage conversation is to have Worf catch a thief in the crawl space above the hallway. This alien has robbed Worf's quarters and was trying to sneak away. Worf takes the thief to security and rants at Odo about how this kind of thing never happened on the Enterprise. So then Odo, who has clearly been waiting for this moment, starts reading off episode summaries from Next Gen that show things weren't always perfect on the Enterprise. Worf understands it's hard to maintain security on the station, but he finds it irritating. I mean, it was literally like Odo picked up a TV guide from the late 80s, early 90s, and he was just ticking off storylines. And Worf was just like, sigh.
Yeah, that was great. The way Worf went from, he was really angry, and then Odo starts picking on him, and then immediately he's like, well, yeah, those things happened, yeah.
Yeah, that was funny.
I will say, if Worf had been a Cardassian, I would love to have seen his reaction because he would have definitely said, those were all problems caused by my predecessor, Tasha Yar.
Oh, yeah, he could have said that. I wasn't in charge of security then.
This was the point I mentioned a few weeks ago about how Odo picks on Worf about this.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because if you look at the Enterprise, there is so many times it got boarded.
It wouldn't be a show otherwise. What would the show be about?
I do like Odo here because he doesn't dwell on this either. And he doesn't try to make anything of it.
He's just had it in his pocket. He was ready for it.
But the way he just calmly explains to Worf about how it's an open port and things are difficult here.
Yeah.
And even agrees with Worf that it's irritating, but it's something you have to get used to. And I like that moment of Odo basically trying to compromise and make Worf understand rather than just You know, the way you said before, he can become sort of petulant.
Yeah. I mean, a little bit of it was almost like something your younger brother would do, where I've just got the thing in my pocket to make fun of your thing, even though you think it's perfect. But at the same time, it was measured. And also, he didn't tell him, oh, you just have to suck it up. Instead, what he said was, yeah, this is a tough station. You know, we have people from all over the place, species from all over coming in. It's difficult to control. So, yeah, I thought his message was certainly different than the message he would have given in season 1.
Right. It seems more of an evolving Odo, especially the way he smiled at the beginning, which was really
smile.
funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like he can't quite get it right.
No. Rom calls a meeting of the workers from the bar. He says they need to form a union and fight back against Quark. The Ferengi all gasp at this, but Lita is thrilled.
Yeah.
The Ferengi says the FCA will destroy all of them because even saying the word union is like committing a crime on Ferenginar. Rom gives an impassioned speech about taking control of their own lives and striking a blow against Quark and exploitation. He really riles everybody up.
He really does. I counted 7 Ferengi in this shot.
Yeah.
And it looks like there was an 8th one to the left of Lita, who was mostly off camera. You like literally see his arm.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, that's going to be a bummer. You go through all the makeup and then your screen time is arm next to Lita.
Yeah.
And Rom actually seems to be wearing kind of a natty outfit.
I didn't actually notice what he was wearing. They've upgraded him now because he's got a little bit more screen time.
Yes.
Get more lines, get a better outfit.
Perhaps that was it.
Well, in the infirmary, Julian is removing a cyst from Miles's neck. Rom comes in to ask for advice on unions. Miles is really happy to hear this because one of his ancestors led the strike of Pennsylvania coal miners in 1902. Miles calls him a hero, which gets Rom all excited, at least until Miles says that he ended up dead in a river before the strike ended.
Hey, he had the biggest funeral in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that was funny.
I do question if Julian's just operating on Miles out in the open. Isn't there's any kinds of patient privacy here?
No, oh heavens, no. Well, last week when they were doing that thing where they were making Kern and Worf look like one of the Klingons on that ship, he did it right in front of the Klingons from that ship. Maybe there's like an invisibility cloak or something that we can't see.
That nobody's ever mentioned.
That nobody's ever mentioned, exactly.
Yeah, I like this scene. I like the way Julian says, if Quark is reasonable, you won't have to strike. And Miles replies with, Quark, reasonable. You'll have to strike.
Yeah, it'll never happen.
Do you think that was showing the difference between Julian, who's kind of, I would say, like an ivory tower thinker, and Miles, who's much more of the man on the ground and understands even the concepts of sort of social class?
Well, it certainly could be that, but it also could just be this thing that Miles has in this episode where he's so pro-union and pro-strike.
Because he knows his own history.
He knows his own history, but also I think it's a little bit of a stereotype.
Yeah.
They get Miles stuck in these stereotypes quite frequently that, oh, he's a working man. So, you know, he's going to understand these kinds of things. And it's a little bit silly, but that it could just be that too.
Yeah, that's true. They do kind of put Miles in a little bit of a box there.
They definitely do. In Ops, Miles is fixing something which irritates Worf. He doesn't understand why everything is always broken on the station. And of course, it's because of all the different technologies coming together.
None of which were meant to work together.
Right.
And cementing the assertion that Mars O'Brien is, in fact, the greatest Starfleet engineer of all time.
Apparently. Well, anyway, Worf wonders how Miles tolerates working in this environment, but Miles actually loves it because there's always something for him to do. He was bored on the Enterprise. Miles says, the station needs me. This clearly irritates Worf.
I would like to refer people to Kim's previous comments about how this is a rundown strip mall.
Yeah, well, it is.
I guess this is another thing highlighting the change of worlds for Worf. Everything was clean and perfect and lit like a high-end shopping mall on the Enterprise. And now he's in Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, it's a little like going from a Fortune 500 company to working at a startup where you have to share the stapler.
Right. Do you have the pen?
Exactly. It's not for everyone. Well, Quark is wearing purple pants and boots today as he enters his bar and he sees his employees all lined up. Rom presents their union demands, which makes Quark laugh uproariously.
Yes, he reacts very badly.
Yeah, so Rom says they're all on strike. Quark laughs again until he watches all of his employees leave and he's alone in the bar.
Yeah, he found the whole thing funny pretty much right up to the point that he realizes that they actually were serious.
Exactly.
I did count 9 Ferengi now.
Oh, how many were there before?
8. 8 plus an arm.
Oh, well there, your missing one has arrived. Well, all the employees are standing on the outside of the bar, paying people to not go into the bar. This is an interesting approach.
It's a very Ferengi approach.
Quark is trying to use holographic versions of himself as waiters through some tech that he acquired. They don't seem to work very well as the holograms keep dropping glasses.
Yes.
I'm a little suspicious of these holograms being able to carry anything at all. That doesn't really make any sense.
They can carry things in the holosuite.
Yeah, but they're not real things.
In the holodecks, the holograms are still solid because, remember, holograms can still kill you if the safeties are off.
That's fine, but we're not in the holosuite. These are just holograms. I don't know. It seems weird to me.
Well, he set up holo emitters in the bar, I would assume.
Okay.
So it's kind of a bit like the holosuite.
All right. You seem confident.
But obviously, he probably bought the cheap program that doesn't quite work right.
Clearly, yeah. Quark calls Odo because he wants Odo to arrest the workers blocking his door. Odo agrees with Quark, and he doesn't like mobs, but he can't do anything about it because Captain Sisko told him not to impinge on the employees' freedom of expression.
Yeah, I like that. Sisko seems to have set his mind on this matter.
Yeah. Patrons can still enter the bar on the second level, so Odo's going to leave them be as long as they're peaceful.
I feel there's a missed opportunity here. Odo could follow the tradition of unions and organizing and beat the pickets up with a few Bajorans. I think that would have followed a good historical norm.
Well, on the second floor, Miles and Julian are guessing who will cross the picket line and sneak into the bar on the second floor.
Yes.
Vulcan? No. Pakleds? Yes. But when Worf enters the bar, Miles is very upset and runs after him.
Yeah, he runs in saying he's going to talk some sense into him.
And now we go to Sisko talking to Miles, Worf, and Julian, who are all in a holding cell. And it seems that Miles and Worf got into a shoving match about crossing the Union line, and Julian somehow ended up with a bruise on his forehead when he tried to stop the argument.
Worf is great here. The way he says, we were having a difference of opinion. I kind of like the way they were all sort of covering for each other here.
Yeah, they were definitely trying to downplay it, which they do quite frequently to Sisko when something goes wrong. They all go in there and are like, oh, no, really, it was okay. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
Well, Sisko tells them they can spend the night in the cell.
Yeah, I think Sisko's finding that a little bit irritating that his officers are getting in arguments.
I have to say it's a little bit dumb to expect that the Starfleet officers would get into a fight over this. I'm not sure I'm buying that. For one thing, we're not supposed to have this internal conflict. We're supposed to have evolved beyond stuff like that.
But Worf's a Klingon.
But it just felt a little bit silly to me.
That's true. It might not make a lot of sense, but I did like it.
Okay. Well, Sisko realizes that he needs to talk to Quark himself. Now it's become a problem.
Yeah.
So now Quark is in Sisko's office claiming that even talking to strikers goes against the sacred precepts of Ferengi culture.
Yeah.
Sisko is too annoyed to even have this conversation. He'll always put up with cultural diversity until it interferes in his own job satisfaction.
That's a really good point.
He reminds Quark that the Federation owns the lease on his bar and helps with repairs and supplies the bar with power. And Sisko has decided that it's time to start collecting on these bills. He says 5 years of all this will be pretty pricey. So Quark agrees to talk to his brother. Is it 5 years? Why would he say 5 years? I guess we're in season 4. I always like it when Sisko strong arms Quark. It's really the only way to get anything out of him.
Yeah, and it's that Sisko thing again of him knowing how to deal with particular races.
Yeah.
Sisko knows that appealing to the higher nature of Ferengi doesn't work.
It's not the answer.
You strong arm them.
Yeah, he's done that since the emissary, since the pilot.
He knows what he's doing.
Well, Quark goes to Rom with a bribe, but Rom rejects it. Rom throws Quark's words back in his face about not being brothers when they work together, and Quark leaves defeated.
This scene as well also reiterates a point you made before, the thing about the data pads.
Oh, yeah.
He has multiple ones, one with each with bits of information on it. And I think it's funny that they got the idea of this data pad, but they sort of missed the fact that they would be multifunction and multi-use.
Of how much it could store and how you could change screens and
Yeah, it's sort of, they're halfway there.
Yeah. Gosh, imagine giving an iPhone to, one of the actors in this year.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Look, here it is.
Cell phones were a little bit basic then.
Well, now Brunt from the FCA has arrived with some Nausicaans in tow. He says he's here to help end the labor dispute. Brunt, of course, is from my least favorite episode in Star Trek history, and the Nausicaans, well, we know them to be violent and unpleasant.
Stab Picard in the heart.
That's right.
In the back as well, wasn't it?
Yes. So the workers now are having a laugh over Quark's misfortune. We get some rules of acquisition quoted here.
Yes.
Like 263, never allow doubt to tarnish your lust for latinum. 211, employees are the rungs on the ladder of success. Don't hesitate to step on them. That's very Ferengi.
Ah, yes.
Rom tells the group about the bribe and riles everyone up again, but in comes Brunt to threaten everyone and just be generally gross.
Absolutely.
After he leaves, Rom points out that none of them have much back on Ferenginar anyway, so Brunt's threats are really kind of pointless.
I like the way Rom actually stands up to the FCA here. And he brings up about if your accounts on Ferenginar were worth anything, you wouldn't be working as a waiter.
Right.
The part of this that does make more sense of I see why the FCA would work is because they make direct threats against their families on Ferenginar.
Right.
You defy the authorities, they'll fine them. It's kind of a classic move by authoritarians. You punish the families of the people who are upsetting you.
Yeah.
It's sort of a indirect threats.
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to bring up here is, so what is Odo doing during all of this?
Well, Brunt is threatening everyone.
There are Nausicans on the station
Right.
who always bring trouble.
Right.
Brunt breaks into a locked door meeting and is issuing threats. And Odo is all good with this.
I don't think Odo would be good with it if he was there, but maybe he's staying out of it. It seems like Sisko told him to just stay out of it until something bad happens, or as long as they're being peaceful, stay out of it. So he's maybe not keeping a close eye on it.
That doesn't seem like Odo, though.
No, it really doesn't. Bill, because he would know that Brunt arrived, and he would know that Brunt arrived with the Nausicaans. So yeah, you would think that he would follow them.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a really good point. Yeah. I think there's some big holes in this episode. I mean, there's one.
I think holes might be an understatement.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, the mob continues to block the front door of Quark's, and Miles keeps an eye on them, even giving them a thumbs up. Worf comes to apologize to Miles. He thinks the station is impacting him negatively. He says he finds it unsettling. I like the way he said that.
Yes.
Miles thinks he'll get used to it, but Worf has decided to move his quarters to the Defiant. Miles says, but you'll be living there all by yourself. I know, Worf says, happily.
Worf seemed actually quite pleased by that concept.
Absolutely. He was into that. Leeta and Rom are walking together, and she's telling Rom that he's really brave. She kisses his forehead before going into her quarters. I guess we're supposed to think that Leeta is dating Julian here.
Yes.
She mentions it a few times, but thankfully we don't really have to see any of it. Quark comes up to talk to Rom, saying now that the FCA is here, we have to end this strike.
Yeah, he's trying a new tactic.
Yes. Well, he always tries different tactics until something works. Usually, we end up at begging always. Quark thinks the Nausicaans are dangerous and they need to work together, but Rom is empowered. He's tired of Quark telling him he's an idiot his whole life just to make himself feel superior, which is quite an insight.
Yeah.
Quark says if Brunt or the FCA decides to get rid of Rom, he won't be able to stop them. But wouldn't Odo be able to? To your point?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a little suspicious.
They're on a Bajoran station run by the Federation in Bajoran space, and there's nobody who can do anything.
Yeah, just kick Brunt out. Don't let the FCA in. Ugh, yeah. Bullshit.
Yeah. Quark trying to tell Rom that he was making him a better Ferengi. That's such a classic after-the-fact justification for really toxic behavior.
Yeah.
It was for your own good.
Uh-huh.
Have you been hanging out with Ducat? Because that's just the kind of thing he'd say.
That is kind of a Ducat line.
Right. I did love it when Rom threw Quark's own words back at him about being an only child.
Yep.
You were asking for that.
Nobody ever holds Quark accountable for anything he says or does, so it is nice to see Rom do it for a change.
Right, right.
And actually, too, for it to sting, because it never sticks with him, right? Everything just falls off, but all of a sudden, Quark is threatened by the FCA and the Nausicaans, so now he's like, oh, darn, maybe I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah, it doesn't help Quark's cause, so now it's a problem.
Yeah.
This is where Quark is so pitifully short-sighted as a character.
This is literally the problem with the Ferengi and why it wouldn't work as a society. They can't be that short-sighted, all of them, all the time, and really last that long.
Yeah.
So in Quarks, the Nausicaans are playing darts by throwing them at each other. I think this might have been my favorite moment in the entire episode.
Yes.
Quark's like, doesn't that hurt? Brunt goes, yeah, probably.
Yeah, I think that says a lot about the Nausicans.
Yeah. Brunt has figured out that it's time to make an example out of someone. It can't be Rom because attacking leaders can turn them into martyrs. So instead, he's going to pick someone else that Rom cares about. He considers Lita, but he settles on Quark, which completely freaks him out.
Yes.
And now in the infirmary, we see Quark has taken a beating. They shattered his left eye socket and punctured a lung. But Quark isn't going to press charges because it doesn't matter. The FCA would just send somebody else. He tells Rom that he can't fight 10,000 years of Ferengi tradition.
Once again, Quark is trapped by his own narrow-minded view of the world.
Yep.
Unable to expand his horizons, he's trapped by it once again.
Yeah.
To his own detriment and now physical harm.
Yeah, and a couple of weeks ago, he was complaining to Julian and Miles that humans only think about themselves. And it's just like, here's a perfect example where you've got all these other things that you could be looking at and comparing yourself to and learning from, but you're so busy stuck in this nonsense that you've got such a tiny brain in your giant head that you're stuck. You're never going to get any better.
Right.
They're lucky to be alive, really. But also, didn't the prophets tell us in that episode, Profit and Loss, that the Ferengi used to be different?
Right.
He says 10,000 years of tradition. Has it really been 10,000 years that they've been like this?
Okay, leaping into overanalysis.
Oh.
I took that as Ferengi propaganda.
Okay.
We've always been like this. This is how we've always been. This is the way things always have been.
Yeah.
Which would fit with the narrow-minded view of how Ferengi are.
That's true.
And how they don't want to change. Or certainly the people running Ferengi society these days don't want it to change.
Okay. Yeah.
The reality that the prophets showed was that the Ferengi were different. And perhaps not even that long ago. And this is a story they tell themselves, or propaganda. This is how we've always been for 10,000 years, when it might only be 1,000.
Right.
Or even less.
Oh, sure. Well, Quark finally gives in. He says he'll give Rom and the others what they want if Rom officially dissolves the Union and makes it look like Quark won. This, of course, is another problem with Ferengi society and why it ultimately wouldn't work.
Yeah.
I mean, remember when one of the companies that we used to work for tried to give me a perk because I threatened to quit, and they said I could have it, but I couldn't tell anyone. It just doesn't work in your favor in the long run. From my perspective, I don't like secrets or being responsible for keeping secrets, but also it just showed me that they were willing to make concessions, when put under pressure, but they weren't willing to do the right thing. And that just wasn't going to work for me in the long run. And I quit anyway.
Yeah.
It was going to make me part of the problem, not part of the solution. And you know I hate that.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Now Worf is removing the soft mattress from his new bunk on the Defiant.
Yes.
And Dax brought him a memory stick of a Klingon opera that he can play through the Defiant sound system. This is very much a reference to someone who grew up in the 70s worrying about the size of their speakers.
Oh.
That really made me laugh. I was just like, oh man, are you playing your 8-track?
Oh, that's funny. I didn't even think of that. That's a good one.
Your giant speakers. Dax says living on the Defiant isn't going to change anything. Sooner or later, he's going to have to adapt. But Worf thinks maybe everyone else will have to adapt to him.
I like that view. I thought that was very fitting for Worf. Maybe their problem is they're not used to having a Klingon. Not that he's not used to being around humans.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Though it's not necessarily the attitude of a successful leader trying to adapt to being on the command track.
Yeah.
I have a little bit more to say about that later in a leadership section.
Oh, the leadership section's in this week. Excellent.
Yes, it is. Well, Quarks is back in business as the cleanse is now over and the employees have all gotten what they wanted. Rom comes in wearing a different uniform with a Bajoran badge on it rather than his waiter uniform. He doesn't want to work at the bar anymore. He is now one of the station's diagnostic and repair technicians, junior grade, night shift. I loved all the caveats. Junior grade, night shift.
I honestly thought this happened much later in the series.
Well, we're almost halfway through.
This has been a great arc for Rom, and I feel it fulfills Nog's statement that his father could have been a chief engineer on a starship.
Yeah.
And now he's actually moving on. Rom is actually becoming a technician on the station. Granted, it's junior grade night shift, but it's still an improvement.
Yeah, it's still better than being a waiter for Quark.
Yes. And after all, Rom did save all the senior staff in Arman Bashir.
Yes, he did. They should be quite grateful for that. Well, the strike taught Rom that he's more successful when he's not under Quark's thumb. I think we could all see that.
Yes.
From Rom's point of view, all he has to look forward to when working at the bar is his brother dying. He thinks he deserves a life of his own, and he says now he'll be a paying customer. Which, how does that make sense? Now where is the money coming from?
Bejor.
I will never understand how money can not work in one group and work in another group and somehow they coexist. I don't get it.
Hand wavy.
Like, how can the Federation not take rent? I mean, stuff supplied by others isn't going to be free just because the money is useless to them. The whole economics of it is very confusing. I almost feel like Roddenberry didn't want to deal with the economics and he just went, oh, money's not important. So now we have to figure out what that means.
I think that's a very good point.
Yes. Well, anyway, the end. Any over-analysis of this episode?
Yes, I think there's a little over-analysis we can do here. The first one is, I think we know why Quark employs Ferengi waiters.
Oh, well, sure. Absolutely. It almost doesn't make any sense that he would employ anybody else because nobody else would think that way.
Yeah, and as for the quality of those Ferengi, during the meeting when Rom says, what does a Ferengi do when he sees an opportunity? And there's this basically pause and Fruel replies, he seizes it? Like he wasn't quite sure what the answer was.
Yeah.
So I think this adds weight to my theory that really Ferengi are the worst businessmen in the galaxy. They're actually terrible at it. I see them as like just idiots nickel and diming each other to death. And the few Ferengi who actually break that mold, like the Nagus and maybe one or two of the others, can make a killing on it because all their countrymen, all their fellow Ferengi are just idiots who can be easily exploited.
Yeah, and inexplicably, they don't seem to learn from the other races around them.
Right, because they have this closed-minded view.
They have that closed-minded view, and also they're under this constant threat from the FCA.
Right.
Which, again, doesn't make sense because you've got to be able to get away from them at some point. They can't be everywhere in the entire galaxy.
And look at Pel.
Yeah, Pel got away.
Yeah.
Hey, poor Pel.
I know, Pel is such a great character.
Yes.
She needed to return.
Ugh. Hopefully she's happy somewhere in the Gamma Quadrant.
Yes, that would be good. Next thing.
Yeah.
Cisco points out they do not charge for rent, repairs, or the drain on the station's power grid.
Yeah.
This proves to me how, particularly, Quark is the worst businessman in the world.
Yeah, that he still says he's only breaking even.
Yeah, you have all of this for free on, as Odo said, a free port station, an open station, and you're not raking in the cash. This is why he should never have let Pel go, because he could have said, forget the Ferengi Trade Authority. He would be rich by now.
Yeah. Well, he's getting no money from the Federation people who are in the bar, so Miles and Julian aren't paying for their synthales, but...
As far as we know.
Oh, no, they covered that at some point. That he supplies to supply them drinks for free. But Morn and others would be paying. So yeah, if he's not paying rent, I mean, where's his money going? And he's also got the holosuites. Yeah, he should be, he should be rich.
Yeah, and he's cooking all his books, so he wouldn't be kicking anything up to the Ferengi authorities.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
Dumb as a brush.
Okay.
Next thing.
Yeah.
So the FCA is clearly the enforcement arm of a totalitarian regime which practices capital punishment and intimidation.
Right.
Why are they not utterly banned from the Federation and from Bejor?
What a great question.
You're allowing them to operate in Federation and Bajoran space with absolute impunity.
I totally agree. It makes no sense that we would tolerate it.
Yeah, and leading on from that, Quark, who was almost beaten to death, said he didn't want to press charges. I feel this is a very Americentric view in the show. Like, if you were in the UK and somebody was a victim of an attempted murder, you don't get to say, oh, please don't prosecute them.
Yeah.
Because the prosecution would be carried out by the Crown Prosecution Services in the UK's instance. You don't get to choose to let attempted murderers go free. That, to me, just doesn't make sense. This, I feel, is the whole weakness in the Ferengi storylines within Deep Space Nine.
Right.
They just don't work.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's not about pressing charges, though. It's about whether or not you will actually come forward as a witness. You could still prosecute, but if you don't have the one person who knows what happened, then your case might fall apart. So it's not just about that. But in this particular case, I mean, come on, surveillance. We knew when the Nausicaans came on board.
Yeah.
And the thing that we never talk about, would there be no DNA evidence? Could he not have pulled parts of the Nausicans' fists out of Quark's face? I mean,
exactly.
It's completely ridiculous to think that Quark not doing something would mean that Odo would do nothing about a violent act on the station.
Right.
I agree 100%.
And this is just another part you could kind of drive a train through this episode.
Yes. I totally agree.
And I think my final point is,
yeah.
Now, Worf seemed genuinely irritated by things on the station breaking and being kind of cobbled together.
Right.
Now, he spent time on a Klingon ship and on the Klingon homeworld, and I've always looked at Klingon technology as kind of cobbled together and just about working. And, you know, if it doesn't work right, just hit it with a hammer. It'll probably start working fine.
Well, and they talked about in one of the episodes about pulling ships out of mothballs, right? Or they would use the ships until they literally fall apart. So, yeah, I would think he would run into this on a Klingon ship all the time.
Yeah. Do you think it's because he spent so much time around humans and was on the Enterprise and the Federation that he's used to things just being perfect and working? So sort of even the Klingon side of it is kind of irritating to him or out of his comfort zone.
Well, part of this is perhaps them telling us that story again, that Worf has gotten soft and that he has really adapted to this world.
Oh,
you and I have had those conversations about the way that I grew up and the way that I like to live now. You definitely can find a different comfort zone. Just, doesn't have to be the way that you were raised.
That's a good point.
But I think that they are trying to reinforce that with us again.
Okay. And that, I think, wraps up my overanalysis for this week.
You had a little overanalysis of an under episode.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it.
Well, I have 2 points in my overanalysis section.
Go.
Ferengi make no sense.
Agreed.
And economics of the Federation make no sense. That's it.
I believe.
Yeah.
Okay, I have an answer for the second one.
Okay.
You wave your hand at it.
Yeah, la la la. Yeah. Well, let me move into a leadership section.
Oh, it's back this week. Hurrah.
I'm trying to figure out how I feel about Worf living on the Defiant and expecting everyone to adapt to him. I suppose from one point of view, he's looking for things to make sense, like they made sense when he was in a Starfleet-controlled environment.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, as a person in command and trying to be a leader, he's not helping his team when he's not trying to adapt and he's not trying to fit in. So he's not setting a good example, I guess.
Yeah.
So I have a little bit of a problem there. And I normally wouldn't care at all, except for the Way of the Warrior. When he changed to the red uniform, he said he had a lot to learn about wearing the red uniform. And this is the kind of thing that makes me constantly think, okay, you should be learning a little bit more about leadership. Cisco has adapted to live on the station, and you might need to adapt too.
Well, Cisco's clearly adapted to multiple environments.
True. Otherwise, if you're going to try to be the leader of a bunch of people who do have to adapt to the station, but yet you're getting different treatment and you're sitting on the outside.
I see what you're saying.
Are those people really going to follow you, or are they going to look at you as other? So I don't think that really helps you as a leader to set yourself apart.
I see what you're saying. That would, to an extent, create kind of a barrier between Worf and the people he's supposed to be working with and ultimately commanding.
It's a different type of leadership, I suppose, a little bit more Klingon-y than it is Starfleet-y.
Right. Yeah, there's the traditional view of the captain who, when they're in charge of the ship, is almost like the god of the ship kind of thing. But he's not there. He's not the captain. He doesn't have the experience.
Exactly.
And in theory, getting to that point, you should be extremely experienced.
Yeah, and the other thing that doesn't help his leadership persona is this idiotic fight that he had with Miles over the Union.
I saw that as just a goofy insert into the show.
I did not like that.
Yeah.
I am so much like Worf about why is this place not more like the Enterprise? That kind of thing, I don't get that. If it had been between Worf and somebody else, it didn't make sense that it was between him and Miles. That's like the only person he gets along with.
It would have been better between Miles, Worf, and the Nausicaans.
Yeah, that would have been something.
Yeah, that would have been great.
Well, let's go to women in the future. The writing of Dax in this episode, it's so awful. I mean, it's unforgivably awful.
She was in for like 2 minutes and managed to annoy you.
Yeah, shocking that you can actually write something that bad for that short of a period of time. And then there was Brunt looking at Lita and then talking about her lobes, which made me just want to vomit. Anytime the Ferengi are involved, women don't win.
That seems to be true, yeah.
But why did they have to crap on Dax in this episode? I mean, she wasn't even a part of the story. They just have no idea how to write her as a female character. It's just, we're 4 seasons in. Do better. All right, let's go to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
Absolute solid neutral.
Wow.
In my opinion, and this is funny, coming back and rewatching some of these episodes, I think when it comes to the Ferengi, in balance, they're kind of a failure on this show.
Yeah.
They don't really work that well. Quark can work kind of as a good foil, but when you try and build a bigger Ferengi arc, it just really kind of falls apart, in my personal opinion.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people love the Ferengi, but I think they're just so weak.
Yeah, and then as a contrast, you've got that rich nature of the Trill, and we hardly ever tap into that, and we should be tapping into that way more. If we could trade every Ferengi episode for another Trill episode, that would be great.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that really bugs me about this episode is, again, it fails as a Star Trek episode because we had the Ferengi forming a union and starting to actually, maybe they could have workers' rights. Maybe they could actually, their society could progress. And what happens at the end? They basically, the Ferengi authorities squash the union and
pretend like it never happened.
And they walked away. Failure as a Star Trek episode.
Yeah, this is really a throwaway episode for me. I don't care about the Ferengi, and Dax's dialogue was completely terrible. Worf and Miles getting to a fight over the strike was completely stupid, and I didn't buy it in the slightest. It seems highly unlikely at this point that any of these people would actually care about unions and picket lines when this kind of strife would have been evolved away many years ago, which of course is silly, but I'm sorry, that's Starfleet and the Federation. The one thing I did buy was Worf deciding to live by himself on the ship. It's like he's living in his car playing his music really loud with the subwoofer in the trunk booming.
Oh.
I can buy that he wants to do that. I mean, I don't think that's a good leadership move, but I can buy that Worf would want to do that. That was really like the only thing in this entire episode that I bought. So thumbs down for me. This is just a yuck of an episode.
Wow, a thumbs down.
Yeah.
I give it a neutral because I liked Odo and Worf, and I admit I found the Julian, Worf, and Miles part just kind of funny.
It's hard for me to neutral the Ferengi. I just think they're terrible.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Every time Brunt turns up, I don't know how my thumb goes anywhere but down. He is just gross. All right, well, that is it for Season 4, Episode 15. Come back next week for Episode 16.
Where we might not beat up on the episode.
In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own overanalysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, you can email us at rebingeit@gmail.com or tweet us at rebingeit. Check us out on talkthroughmedia.com. You can leave feedback there for individual episodes, and you can also listen to our other podcast, Star Trek Prodigy, a Rebingeit podcast.
Thanks for joining us on the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.